As always, Douglas Murray has a brilliant analysis about what's going on with Israel and hostility to Jews. I want you to watch this clip of him talking about how anti-Semitism mutates and how it manifests in the world. It's really a great, great speech he gave recently at l'Europe contre l'Antisemitism, I believe in France. Have a watch.
Anti-Semitism is famously a shape-shifting virus. Sometimes in the past, people hated Jews for their religion. Then you couldn't hate people for their religion, so people hated the Jews for their race. Then, when you weren't allowed to hate people for their race anymore, you could hate the Jews for having and defending a state. This is the eternal challenge for the Jewish people. Gregor von Retzori, among others, showed us this. It's their challenge to be hated for being poor and for being rich. For being integrated and for not integrating. For being stateless, remember, rootless cosmopolitans, and also to be hated for having a state. But this is not only a challenge for the Jews, it's a challenge for all of us. As Vasily Grossman wrote in the dead center of his masterpiece, Life and Fate, and I quote, "Anti-Semitism is always a means rather than an end. It is a measure of the contradictions yet to be resolved. It is a mirror for the failings of individuals, social structures, and state systems. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of. I'll tell you what you're guilty of."
Bravo.
Today in Europe, this ancient hatred can come from the left and the right. We have to be alert to it and stand up to it whichever direction it comes from. Because among much else, everybody knows that anti-Semitism is an early warning sign. When a society starts to indulge in this lurid, paranoid fantasy, every other hatred comes next. We in Europe have a special debt to history and memory, and a special debt to the Jews. And not just because of what they suffered on our continent, but because of the richness of culture, learning, and faith that Jews have brought to our civilization.
I'm so glad he finished with that point there, because this, to me, actually gets to the heart of it. That analysis that the anti-Semitism that we see clearly are just excuses. You know, when they say we hate you because you're rich, yeah, but then you hate the Jews because they're poor and because you say they're inferior and they're just parasites. You hate Jews because they're capitalists, because they're communists, because they killed Jesus, because they created Jesus, because they're parasites on other people's lands because they created their own nation state. As he quoted from Grossman there, I actually wasn't familiar with that quote. Anti-Semitism is a means, not the end. Then the question is, what is the end? Why is it that the Jews bother people so much? You know, I was reading the beginning of Genesis, and Rashi, who's one of the famous commentators on the Torah, his first comment on the book of Genesis is that, why does God start with the creation of the world? Why doesn't he start with the first commandment? Because he says in the future, the nations of the world are going to say the Jews are foreign occupiers, colonizers of a land not their own. And they're going to say, you have no right to be there. And the Jewish people will respond by saying, God is the creator of heaven and earth. And he assigned us this land. Which, by the way, is incredible. And it's amazing how all the world's attention and political attention is actually going to be focused on this issue. And it's amazing that's it's sort of like the culmination of the world's destiny is centered around the land. And Rashi, a French medieval commentator, picked that up hundreds of years ago. Incredible. But what's really interesting is that I believe it was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who he was the last Chabad rabbi, very, very famous and influential rabbi of the 20th century, who said that the nations saying you have no right to be there is not really just about the nations about the Jews being in the land of Israel. It's saying you have no right to the land, period, meaning all the lands in the world. You have no right to be here at all. Hasn't that been the story of Jewish history to date? Wherever we go and don't go, they're saying they give obviously excuses, but the real end is they feel we don't have a right to be here. Why? The Jewish people are God's nation. They're his emissaries to bring his vision down to the world. The other nations of the world are the nations of the world, the worldly nations. So they feel we belong in the world. We're the nations of the world. A nation of God belongs in heaven. Get out of here. You don't belong here. Stop frustrating our existence. Let us be earth and you be in heaven. That's what's going on at a deeper level. That's the resistance. But it's really fundamentally a resistance to God's plan, because God wants to pervade all of the world. He wants to have a dwelling place in this world. He wants a relationship with someone other than himself, with something other than the spiritual. He wants to have a relationship with humanity. And so the pushing back of the Jewish people is really pushing back against God's vision, his plan. It's also sometimes a bit of a jealousy and envy and resentment for the Jewish people's role in bringing that vision down to earth. But the solution to that is to acknowledge, finally, the truth of the Jewish people, the truth of God's vision, and that being the reason why all of us are here, Jew and non-Jew. And finally coming to terms and accepting that we have different roles in this world, and that's okay. The Jewish people are meant to be the teachers of God's vision to the world. The nations of the world are meant to be the students and the ones who improve bring the world heavenwards through actualizing those things, through improving the existence of everyone, through taking on the lessons. The Jewish people bring heaven towards earth. The nations of the world bring earth towards heaven. We all have a role. We have a chosen people within the chosen people in the Jewish people, the Kohanim, the priests. Jews don't persecute the Kohanim, the priests. We don't feel resentful or jealous that they have a different role. No. Because as long as I'm here, that means I have a unique role to contribute. I have a unique mission. So what that I don't have, the mission of someone else? It doesn't matter. What matters is, am I necessary? And so we can talk about the double standards. We can talk about the contradictions of anti-Semitism, and it's worth pointing them out so people can see that. But the route to dealing with it is to deal with it, as Grossman says, the end. And the end is that it's a pushing back, a resentment, a rebellion against who the Jewish people are and what their role is. And for as long as we continue to deny the differences that we have with the nations of the world, the more the problems are going to fester. Because when we say, look at all your double standards, look how you're just bullying us, abusing us, and it's all just nonsense accusations against us, stop treating us so different, that's not going to solve the problem. Because part of what motivates anti-Semitism is that they know we are different. And the more we deny it, people think that's going to help solve the problem. No, it actually just perpetuates the problem. Because they know we are different. And they feel like we're trying to fool them when we say, no, we're just like you, and start treating us just like you. Bit of a radical shift. People think that declaring the Jewish people's chosenness, chosen for a role, would increase anti-Semitism. Actually, it's our denying of it that perpetuates it. Difference does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. In a world that's crying out for moral leadership and direction, it can be a very wonderful thing, actually. Difference is something to be celebrated. There's dignity in all of us being different. We say, content like what Douglas was saying at the start, Jews will say, look, you see, the world's out to get us. Well, I'd respond by saying, yes, they want to get us. They don't get us. They know we're different. They sense it, and they want to get us. So we have to do our part as well and explain to them who we really are. Because more than anything else. They, the world, are crying out for it. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.